Hello and welcome to the Ellen May Book Club and the announcement for the Diversity Book Bingo 2026. If you have watched my channel before, you probably know that I hosted the Diversity Book Bingo for the first time in 2025, and I'm doing it again next year. And if you're new here, welcome. Everyone's welcome to join the challenge, and there are different ways that you can do it, so hopefully you will find a way that works for you. The concept for the challenge is the same as for 2025. Some of the prompts are the same, some prompts are new, and if you want, there are also more prompts. In this video, I will go through the basic setup and rules for the challenge, a few different options for how you can participate, and of course, all of the prompts. I did ask for feedback in a survey that I did, and I will refer to that in a couple of places just to answer some questions that people had and just clarify my thinking in some of these prompts. The basic idea for this challenge is that you read books from all 6 continents, and with all 6 diversity representation types that I have chosen to include in this challenge, which I will get into. And the books that you read for the different continents and the diversity representation also go on to a bingo board where there are more prompts. So the continents and the diversity representation prompts always double up with the prompts on the bingo board. So if you read a book set in Africa, for instance, with disability representation, let's say, you also should match that to a prompt on the bingo board so that you can put it somewhere on the bingo board and eventually get a bingo. It is completely up to you to decide how challenging you want to make this challenge. If you only want to count own voices, for instance, or if you want to include any kind of representation. On the bingo board, you can go for a blackout board, or you can go for 1 bingo row, 2 bingo rows, or just do whichever prompts you feel like. You can choose to only count 1 book per prompt, or you can choose to double up and count 1 book for several prompts. Those are the basic rules, and now let's get into the challenge for 2026. As you might know, I think reading challenges and reading prompts are really fun, and I participated in a lot of reading challenges in 2025, and sometimes I felt like all of the other challenges were for fun, and the Diversity Book Bingo was kind of the serious, heavy one, and it does deal with serious and important topics, but I also want it to be fun. And I thought about doing a separate challenge with 12 prompts just for fun, but then I thought, why don't I just incorporate them into the bingo? I wanted to do something with the theme of 6 because it's 2026, and I already had the minimum requirement to read 6 books because of the 6 continents, but it always annoyed me that you couldn't put those 6 books in a row on the bingo board because you could only fit 5 in a row because it was a 5x5 bingo board. So then I thought, why don't I just make a 6x6 bingo board, and that way you can get a bingo with 6 books in a row, and I could also fit in all of the fun prompts in there. So this year there will be a bingo board with 36 prompts. There will also be a bingo board with 25 prompts, just like last year, if 36 feels a bit overwhelming to you. I also decided to make an option with 12 prompts and an option with 6 prompts. And then I've also included some blank templates so that you can just pick and choose whichever prompts you like and just read books that count for those. There will be a challenge set up on StoryGraph as well, where the continents and the diversity representation prompts will be required, and all of the other prompts from the bingo boards will be optional so that you can, have some flexibility. And as I go through the prompts in this video, I will put up examples of books that would count for each prompt, and all of those books will also be added to each prompt on the StoryGraph. So if you're ever stuck on a prompt and don't know what to read for it, you can always check on the StoryGraph challenge. People will add their books to the challenge throughout the year as well, and I will also keep adding books to there. So that is a great place to look for some inspiration. There's also a server for the challenge on Discord, which you are more than welcome to join, where you can ask for recommendations and just talk about the books that you're reading with other people who also want to diversify their reading. The StoryGraph challenge and the Discord server will be linked in the description, and there you will also find a link to a Google document with all of the information and the prompts and the rules and all of that, as well as some graphics that you can download to print or to use in videos or posts or however you like. With all that being said, let's get into the prompts. To complete the Diversity Book Bingo reading challenge, you need to read at least one book from each of the 6 continents: North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia or Oceania. Ideally, the author should be from that continent and live there, and the book should ideally be set there. If you want to read fantasy books and count those towards the continents, you can, and then you would base it on the author. I would encourage you to read something that isn't fantasy for, each of the continents, at least one book, but, it's completely up to you. I would also encourage you to read more than one book from each of the continents if you can. It's easy to check off each continent with just one book and then go back to the continents that you tend to read from. And so I would just encourage you to sort of keep an even spread if you want to. In the survey that I did, there was one comment or response to the survey, so thank you so much for participating in that. But the comment said to not include Hawaii in the continent of North America. And the continents for the challenge are, divided geographically or politically, not culturally. And I think that, including Hawaii in North America just means you have more diversity within the continent. North America also includes Central America, so I think there's a lot of different cultures in there. And also even just within the US, there are many different cultures. So including Hawaii in North America just gives you an option to read a book that isn't the normal or dominant type of literature or voice that you would hear from North America. It's a way for you to check off North America without just reading something from an author that is very well known and, from a very dominant group of people. To complete the challenge, you also need to read at least one book from each of the 6 types of diversity representation that I have chosen to include in this challenge. Own voices are encouraged, but if you want to count any type of representation, that is up to you. It's not always possible to know if it's own voices, and it's not, something that you should try to find if people are not openly expressing that. Use your judgment and do whatever you want. The point is just to encourage you to read books from different kinds of people. In the 2025 challenge, we had 5 types of diversity representation, and those 5 are still included this year. And those are Indigenous people, minority, LGBTQIA+, disability, and neurodivergence. And this year, I've also decided to include religion as a type of diversity representation that can often go hand in hand with minority, just like Indigenous people can, but not always. And I think that religion is something that has a lot of influence on a lot of things. And so it's important to hear from people with different religious beliefs and different experiences around that. I won't go into the definitions of these terms here, but if you want to learn more about any of them and what they entail, I will have some links in the Google Doc that is linked in the description box where you can find out some more information. Moving on to the prompts on the bingo board. Like I said, this year there will be a bingo board with 36 prompts. You can read 36 books for this challenge if you want to, but you don't have to. You can choose one of the smaller ways to participate with fewer books, or you can choose to double up and use one book for several of these 36 prompts. Or you can just read books for whatever prompts you want. It's all up to you and no pressure. It's here if you want to, and I don't know, I just wanted to do a lot of prompts. Also, a big thank you to everyone who participated in the survey and helped me get a sense of which prompts you liked and didn't like. I also had prompts I liked and didn't like. So some of the prompts will be the same as last year and some of them are new. As it is a challenge for 2026, we're going with 6s, and so I have 6 categories of prompts with 6 prompts in each category for the most part. The first category only has 3 prompts, and those are the geographical ones. The first prompt is to read a book from a country that you've never read from before. We had this last year and people seemed to like it, and I did too, and I think it's, you know, very much in the spirit of this challenge, so that prompt is staying this year as well. Another prompt that is the same as last year is to read a translated book. I would also encourage you to read more than one translated book, but you know, I'm including at least one prompt on the bingo board to make sure that just one of the books that you read are translated. The third prompt in this category is to read a book that is somehow tied to local geography. So it can be a book set on an island, which was the prompt last year, something that is set in the desert or in the mountains, in a snowy climate, or in the jungle, like anything that you can think of that is somehow tied to geography and climate and like place. Those are books that will count for this prompt. The next category of prompts have to do with your personal well-being, or like just some feel-good prompts to just give you good vibes throughout 2026. Two of the prompts are the same as last year. The first one of those is a comfort read. This can be a reread or just a book that brings you comfort somehow. It can be cozy or it can be horror, you know, whatever brings comfort to you. The other repeat prompt is a 5-star read. I want you to find a book that you really love, that you think is great, that you would rate 5 out of 5 stars. The third prompt is to read a book that brings you joy. It can be a funny book that makes you laugh, or it can be a heartwarming book that just makes you feel happy and joyful. It can be a horrible book that you still think was funny because you read it with a friend and you laughed at it. Any kind of reading experience that brings you joy for whatever reason will count for this prompt. The fourth prompt is a personal goal, and this is just to read a book that somehow moves you closer to whatever goal you have. If it is to read what you own, if you have, you know, a set list of books that you want to read next year, any of those will count. If you have a goal to read more books from the library, a library book will count. Like whatever your goals are, that will count for this prompt. The next prompt is a quick or easy read. This can be a short story, a novella, a short nonfiction book, a graphic novel, middle grade book, something that you're just flying through or just find to be easy to read. It can be a longer book as well, something that you would classify as quick or easy. And then the final prompt in this category is to read a book with a cover that you love. I don't think I need to explain that one. The next category of prompts is largely the same as last year, and these are prompts that are book related, genre, publishing, that sort of thing. The first prompt here is to read a nonfiction book, and this can be any kind of nonfiction. It can be a, you know, regular sized nonfiction book about a certain topic. It can be a memoir, it can be an essay, an article, a poem, anything that you wouldn't classify as fiction but as nonfiction would count for this prompt. The second prompt is to read a memoir or biography, which is also, you know, a nonfiction book, but specifically about a person and their life experience. Next prompt is to read a 2026 release. So any book that has been published in 2026. It can be a brand new release. It can be a book that has been published in a new language in 2026, or in a new format like audiobook or ebook or in Braille. I also want you to read a backlist book, so not the latest release by an author. Go back through the years and find a book that you want to read that is not published in 2026. The next prompt is to read a debut novel or book. The first book that an author has published. It can be a debut in 2026, or you can go back through an author's backlist and read the first book that they ever published. Either of those would count for this prompt. And then the final prompt in this category, which I don't know if it fits this category or not, but it's here, we're going with it. And that is to read a challenging book. It's completely up to you to decide in what way it's challenging. Maybe it's a big book that is very long. Maybe it's a difficult topic. Maybe it's written in a way that is a bit more challenging. Maybe it's something that is challenging your beliefs or your views in some way. Any way, shape, or form that you find it challenging will make it count for this prompt. Category number 4 is themes. Here we have a couple of repeat prompts as well. The first one is migration. So that is to read a book that somehow deals with people moving from one place to another, typically between countries, sometimes between continents, sometimes, smaller distances. It usually can coincide with an immigrant experience. And yeah, there's just lots to choose from in this category of stories. It can be fiction and nonfiction, and like that goes for pretty much all of these prompts. You can choose whatever books you want. The second prompt is also one that we had last year, and that is mental health. So any book that has mental health representation in it, or that you find is beneficial to your own mental health. So that can be, again, a nonfiction or a fiction book that you want to read to make yourself feel better or learn something about mental health. I did have a comment through the survey that I did about more like explicitly mentioning mental health like as maybe a type of diversity representation. And I think that's a very valid point, and thank you for mentioning that and like calling attention to that, because I think it's a very important topic, and it's there's a lot of range within mental health as well, and I think it's important to read books with that kind of representation as well. I didn't want to put it as like a diversity representation type and like force people to read something with mental health representation. As a prompt on the bingo board, it can include a book that just makes you feel good and like that you just read for joy, and like that's also something that's beneficial to your mental health. But I also think that for one thing, it can be very triggering if it's something that you're dealing with yourself, as can a lot of the topics within this challenge. But I think that reading something with mental health representation that doesn't bring you down can be hard to find, especially if you're struggling with it yourself. And I also think that mental health goes hand in hand with a lot of the other prompts. So like migration, like we just talked about, disability and neurodivergence are also closely linked to mental health. It's a part of everyone's experience, more or less. And so I want to leave that open to you. So if you want to include more mental health representation within this challenge, you are definitely free to do so. But I don't want to like force that on anyone, because that's not the focus of this challenge. It's diversity and not necessarily mental health, even though that is a part of it. But like, yeah, I hope that makes sense. The next prompt in this category is to read a book with connection to climate or nature. Last year, we had a prompt that was to read a book about animals, and that can definitely be included in this prompt. But it can also be anything about, the climate, environment, anything connected to nature and plants and being outside. If you want to read some poetry about the flowers blooming in the springtime, that can count. If you want to read a more serious nonfiction book about climate change, that also counts. If you want to read some sci-fi, like, dystopian or hopeful science fiction about the world and, with changes in climate somehow, all of that can count for this prompt. Theme number 4 this year is history. That can be recent history, ancient history, and everything in between, and anywhere in the world. So yeah, it can be historical fiction. It can be, a book with like different timelines. It can be a nonfiction book about something historical, an historical event, historical phenomenon, development of something. Any kind of history will count for this prompt. The next theme prompt is generation, and for this I want you to read a book that is either meant for a different generation than your own. If you're an adult, you might read a middle grade book or a young adult book. If you are younger, you might want to read a book that is geared more towards an older audience, or that has a main character that is a different age than your own. Can be younger, can be older. A generational family saga where you have different generations of characters in the book. Maybe it's a book that, an older relative of yours loved and you want to read it and share that experience with them, or your kids. Anything that you can connect to the theme of generation will count for this prompt. And then the final theme is the arts. So for this, I want you to read a book that is somehow connected to painting, dancing, music, theater, anything within that sort of artistic, creative realm will count for this prompt. It can be a fictional story where art is sort of prominent. It can be historical fiction about a certain person, or nonfiction, a biography about an artist from somewhere in the world. It can be a book that is a work of art in itself. If you want to make it easy for yourself, maybe it has art on the cover. You can play with this and do whatever you like. If you can find a book with art from a different part of the world than your own, I think that would be interesting. And I'm curious to see what books you will pick for this one. Now we just have 2 categories of prompts left. I know there's a lot, but I think these 2 categories are more of the fun prompts, so hopefully you will agree with that. Category number 5 is community. This year I've included the library prompt in this category because, libraries are a very important part of any community. And it's a way to share books and reading experiences with others. So the only thing you have to do to fulfill this prompt is to read a book that you have borrowed from your library. The next prompt is buddy read or read along. So anything that you read with others somehow, whether they know it or not, will count for this prompt. You can do a buddy read with a friend. You can read a book that someone else has said they're going to read, and you just read it by yourself, but like at the same time that someone else is reading it. you watch their review of it or whatever and have a conversation with them in the comments or something like that. You can join a read along that is hosted on any platform. Booktube has lots of them. Or you can count anything that you read for a book club. Any kind of communal reading basically goes into this prompt. Next, I want you to read a seasonal book in the season that it's seasonal for. That can be connected to a certain part of the year, like a Christmas romance, some horror in fall, a summer romance, or a summer thriller, or it can be connected to any kind of event on Booktube or otherwise. There's Jane Austen July, so if you want to read a Jane Austen book in summer, that would count as seasonal. If you want to read horror in mayhem, that would also count. Middle grade March, there are lots of these like recurring events. Nonfiction November, all of those kinds of things would count as seasonal. The next prompt is to read a book recommended by a booktuber, any booktuber that you watch or don't watch. You can search for, favorites of the year, or maybe recommendation list kind of videos within a specific genre if you're looking for that. Or you can just ask. If you watch a specific booktuber and you trust their recommendations, you can just write a little comment and ask for a recommendation, and that will count as well. The next community prompt is buzzword, and this is to read a book for any of the prompts on any of the buzzword challenges, which is hosted by Kayla at Books and Lala. I think this is a challenge that a lot of people do, and so I just want there to be an opportunity for you to incorporate any of those books into this challenge. If you don't participate in that challenge, that's fine. Just look at what the prompts are, pick one, and read a book that fits for that. I don't know what those prompts are because those haven't been announced yet, but in 2025 there was one challenge for titles and one challenge for covers, and I'm expecting the same to happen next year, but we'll see. Any of those prompts will count for this prompt. And then the final community prompt is a poll pick. You can ask a friend or your partner, hold up 2 books and have them choose which one to read. Ask your cat or a neighbor or whoever you like. You can also do a poll on your Booktube channel if you have one of those, or your Instagram. And there will also be a place on the Discord server for poll picks, so you can type in your options there and have people vote during a set amount of time, and then that is the book that you read for this prompt. I think poll picks are a really fun way to engage with other readers in a very low stakes kind of way. And it can also be very helpful when you can't decide which book to read next. Okay, we're finally at the 6th and final category of prompts. These have to do with the cover of books or the title of books, or, they're very open to interpretation. You can connect it to the themes or contents storyline of a book. It's open to interpretation and you do whatever you want with it. But these are the prompts that I have included. There are 9 of them, but I think they're all fun. The first prompt is unreal. So this can include any fantasy, science fiction, horror, paranormal kind of book, but it can also be something with an unreal word in the title, you know, something that doesn't exist in real life, or that has something on the cover that looks unreal. It can be time travel in some way, some kind of distorted reality, a dystopia, something on the cover that just isn't real. Maybe it's just an illustrated cover that isn't like a photo. That's unreal. Anything you can connect to the word unreal will count for this prompt. Prompt number 2 is to read a book connected somehow to your zodiac sign. I'm a Sagittarius, so for me that could mean a book with, you know, a weapon on the cover, or maybe an animal on the cover because of the whole like horse thing. Sagittarius is a fire sign, so it can be anything with fire on the cover or in the title. Sagittariuses are said to be adventurous, so anything with an adventure. I will let you decide how to interpret that, and I'm looking forward to seeing your choices. Prompt number 3 is to read a colorful book. The easiest way to interpret this is to read a book with a colorful cover, lots of different bright colors on it. It can also be a book with a color in the title or many colors in the title. It can be a book where the story feels colorful, where there's a lot of different characters and a lot of like descriptions of colorful things. Do with that what you will. The next prompt is to read a book with something broken on the cover or in the title. Or, you know, in the story, I don't know. I think the easiest way to interpret this is to read with something broken on the cover. It can be something that's just like, you know, in pieces, or like cracked glass, or like splinters of things, torn paper. If you find books with broken sort of words in the title, or maybe like the text is broken, like the actual words on the cover. It can also be a book about something that is broken. You know, maybe a society is broken, maybe someone's heart is broken. Any way you want to interpret this is fine by me. The next prompt is liquid, and same thing here. Anything liquid on the cover, in the title, or like as a prominent part of the story will count for this prompt. The liquid can be water or blood, tears, sweat, coffee, wine, tea. Anything that is liquid will count for this prompt. Just 4 more prompts to go now and then we're done. The next one is to read a book with an ambiguous cover, title, or plot. This can be a cover image that is 2 things at once, you know, like the duck and the hare. If you look at it differently, it looks like something else. It can be a title that has sort of a dual meaning, or like can be interpreted in different ways. And it can be an ambiguous sort of story where you're like, did this mean this, or was it about this? The next prompt is body part. This can be a book with a body part, or like part of a body on the cover. It can be someone's head, someone's hand, a heart, a brain, a foot, like half of a body, all of the body and no head, eyes, a mouth. It can also be all of those things in the title, or maybe a body part is an important part of the story itself. Again, it's all up to you to choose. The second to last prompt is lock and key. Books with locks or keys on the cover I feel like are pretty common. It can also be, you know, part of someone's name. The author might be called something with lock or key. It might be a character with those kinds of names. It can be something where something is locked in the story and the characters have to find the key to open the lock. It can be a book that unlocked something in your mind and you're just like, something clicked and you're like, that's a lock and key kind of book. I don't know. And then the very last prompt, the final prompt, prompt number 36, is pronoun. This can mean having a pronoun in the title. The common ones are, you know, the personal ones, I, me, you, he, she, they, us, ours. But there are also other kinds of pronouns that are like indefinite and stuff. Other, someone, everyone. stuff like that. It can of course also be a book where pronouns are important. Maybe someone is non-binary in the book, or the author is, and there's a discussion about pronouns or just a use of neo-pronouns or non-binary pronouns. Or it can be like a factual book about that. Any book where you feel like pronouns are a thing can count for this prompt. Okay, I know that was a lot. Thank you so much for making it to the end. I will just remind you of everything that is linked in the description below, the Google Doc with all of the prompts, all of the graphics with the different prompts and the different ways that you can play this challenge, the StoryGraph challenge where you can get some inspiration and keep track of all of the books you want to read, and then the Discord server that you are more than welcome to join to chat with other people who are also doing this challenge this year. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Did I say the 4th?